Ahodan Gariwadegwa, the words before all else. I was told by people in the filmmaking industry that I shouldn't start the documentary with the Thanksgiving address. It can take up to 20 minutes to thank all elements of creation. And it's all in Mohawk, so you can't understand any of it. Most people don't speak Mohawk. I was told you'll lose them. They won't watch it. And for me, that was exactly why we had to start this film with the Ahoda Gariwadegwa. I remember the first time I heard the Thanksgiving address, I had no idea what they were saying. I was at a conference sitting there, an elder walked to the front of the room and started speaking. And even though I couldn't understand it, I knew it was significant. I knew it was important. I felt it in my bones, in my blood. But when I looked around, I saw people on their phones, checking out, getting bored and impatient. And it became very clear to me that this is part of the problem in our society. We're in this microwave society where we want everything now. We want it so bad that we can't even take the time to acknowledge the gratitude and the thankfulness for the things that we have that keep us alive. So as you listen to the Ahoda Gariwadegwa, I really want you to, even though you don't understand what they're saying, I really want you to connect with the feeling of gratitude and giving that thanks for all of these things and listening with a good mind.
Ndaye tina warado na ungwai sua. Eto gari na yo tuhage na ngwa niguna. Ndaye tina warado na eti nistaha johwanjade. Eto gari na yo tuhage na ngwa niguna. Ndaye tina warado na gahniga sua. Eto gari na yo tuhage na ngwa niguna. Ndaye tina warado na gunjo sua. Da eto na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tina wanado na yotunduni. Da eto na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tina wanado na ono kwa sua. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tina wanado na asa nigunda de kohogua. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tina warado ne wahyaniunta. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa niguna. Da tina warado ne gundirio. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa niguna. Da tina warado ne garunda sua. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa niguna. Da tina warado ne zita ogua. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa niguna. Da tina warado na gayeri ni gawarage. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tina warado na eti sotogo radiweras. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tsidawa no warado na tsidawa tia anje kene garakwa. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tina warado na eti sota asta neka garakwa. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tina warado na yoji stoh kwaronyo. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tina warado na dion kiadado. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da tsidawa no warado na sungwaya dizu. Da eto gari na yotoge na ngwa nigura. Da eto.
Sego Skanagoa. Layla Black Youngyats, Anuwari, Niwagi, Daroden, Ganyakehaga, Niwagon, Wandroden, Oswego, Nidawageno. Hello, my name's Layla Black. I'm Mohawk Turtle Clan from Six Nations. Mohawk Turtle Clan. But I never really knew what that meant. My Riga'on and Kega'on are generational survivors of the residential school. It was only recently when we made this decision to reclaim our Haudenosaunee identity, our language, our culture, that we started to become aware of just how impacted we had been from this ongoing trauma of residential schools. And as we begin to understand what we didn't know, it also became apparent that some things we didn't need to learn. We didn't have to be taught these things because they were in our blood all along. And one of those lessons was our connection to the water. It's literally in our blood. And one of the first things that I learned along this journey was the importance of the Thanksgiving address, the Ahodan Gariwadegwa, the words before all else. No ceremony, no gathering, nothing of significance would begin without these words. Uniting our minds, all as one, to give thanks. And the waters are just one of the elements recognized in this address. Onega Shon'a, the waters. We give thanks to the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms. Waterfalls, rain, mist, streams, rivers, and oceans. Water connects us. Without it, we die. With one mind, we give thanks to the spirit of the water. Now, our minds are one. As I share my Papa's story with you, I want you to think about your own connection to water. Feel it flow within you. Feel it pulse in your veins, in your blood. So let's go back to where my relationship with water first started. Gord Staats, the son of Ernest and Susan Staats, the grandson of Christine Staats. My middle name is Christine, after her. Christine was a student at the Mohawk Institute Residential School. I never knew her, but I feel like I still carry her with me. And one of the things I definitely feel is the trauma. I remember stories of her being passed down, of her escaping from the windows and scaling the walls just to get away. Instead of passing down a gift of culture and language and this beautiful tradition to her children and her grandchildren, like the Creator intended, she passed down a coat of shame. She literally had the Indian beat out of her, and that trauma trickled down through our family. The love that one gets from a parent, Christine never had, never learned how to experience, how to share it. Imagine that. As a child, never feeling love, never experiencing love. And that pattern continues through generations. My Papa's childhood was cold and hard. Because of that residential school, he didn't know his language. He didn't know his culture. He didn't know anything that I'm about to share with you here in this video. And I always saw him as kind of afraid of it. He would tell us not to use our last name on our resume because we wouldn't get the job. He would tell us not to tell people that we were Native, not to go to the reserve because it was dangerous. He cast that coat of shame down to us, his grandchildren. We were Mohawk Turtle Clan, but that was all we knew, and we didn't even know what that meant. And like a lot of families dealing with this intergenerational trauma, alcoholism, violence, depression, trauma sprinkled throughout my family. It spread like a virus you couldn't get rid of. And only when my brother and sister and I started to learn our Haudenosaunee culture did we start to recognize this dark spot that had been living inside of us. And as I started to learn about the history of my family, the history of what happened to hundreds of thousands of these Indigenous children, what happened to Christine, I started to understand those feelings of not belonging. I started to understand that pain and anger I was carrying around. And I really started to get it. And thus started my healing journey. My Papa may have never taught me the Ahodan Gariwadegwa. He didn't show me the ceremonies. He didn't show me the history of the Ganyakehaga. But one thing he did teach me was the relationship and responsibility that I had to water. As I look back now, I see residential schools. They may have cut their hair off. They may have taken their names and give them numbers, taken their language. But even through that coat of shame, my papa felt the water. It was alive to him. It was alive inside of him. And he passed that on to me. Nyawagoa, Gord. Every morning he'd wake up at dawn and he would walk this land. He dug these ponds on this land so that future generations of his family would always have access to water. He spoke at conferences in our nation's capital about how these ponds could help Indigenous communities that didn't have access to water. He dug ponds for other people in the community. Water is in our blood, and I come to these spots to see through all of that trauma that was passed down to me and heal with the water. We all have different connections with the water. Different, yet the same.
To me, the water is almost like a physical manifestation of spirit. You can see spirit flowing down beside you.
For me, whenever I'm feeling, down or lost, or I just have a question, I just go and I sit by the water and I just listen, and it all comes and it all just feels right.
I grew up on an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and when I left, I remember dreaming about it. And I still dream about it decades later, because the water that I grew up around was also in my blood.
Water is what makes up most of your body. So it's outside of you and it's alive and well, just like your body is. So you can literally see the spirit in the water as it's flowing.
The Grand River has been an integral part of the Haudenosaunee life. The city of Brantford and surrounding areas is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Attawatam people. And the work we do, the activism, the learning, it will never be complete unless we acknowledge and remind ourselves and others that colonization is not just a thing of the past. We must acknowledge settlers have access to this land because of colonial violence. The Haldimand Treaty guaranteed the exclusive use of 950,000 acres, 6 miles along each side of the Grand River, to the Haudenosaunee people, to the members of Six Nations. To this day, through the process of colonialism, racism, genocide, settlers have secured 902,000 acres, leaving 48,000 acres for Six Nations. So we have to acknowledge the resilience of these Six Nations communities that have lived, loved, and resisted here forever. We acknowledge the resilience of this land. We acknowledge our role in decolonizing the mindset of the land we all call home now. And after all these broken treaties and stolen lands, still more than 50% of homes on Six Nations are running without running water. But who has the rights to these waters? The Haudenosaunee speak in terms of responsibility, respect to the water, not in terms of water rights. The law of the land is not of police and government, but it's a higher law. The original instructions, Ahodan Gariwadegwa. The Creator gave us this task as humans to recite the Thanksgiving address, which is a constant reminder of the early law of the land, to first give thanks. We believe that at one time all creatures, all living things could communicate, talk to each other, even the water. Today, the water's lost its ability, lost its voice, and it's the responsibility of the Haudenosaunee to uphold the voice of the water. It was passed down to us. So being the voice of the water, much different than owning it or having a right to it. What happens if we don't have enough water? What happens if we poison our water? What does our world look like? My papa may have never learned the traditional beliefs of his ancestors. He never learned the Thanksgiving address. He never went to Longhouse, and he never spoke a single Mohawk word.
He didn't really have a connection to his culture, but without knowing it, he was like one of the most indigenous men that I knew. The knowledge that he carried, how to create these ponds, how to create clean ecosystems and habitats for all our creatures out here, how to really, cultivate the water and make it safe to drink. It's just so amazing to kind of watch him do these super indigenous things without really knowing who he was.
He may have been ashamed and afraid of who he was because of colonization. But it's not too late for us. It was those walks along the water's edge where I first remember truly feeling connected. Connected to the bigger picture, connected to nature, connected to life and to Mother Earth. I remember understanding at a very early age I had to take care of the water. And now I'm understanding that it's my responsibility to be the voice of the water, which is why I wanted to make this film. I wanted to share his story and other stories. I get to sing with the water, to the water, for the water. Water is life. It holds energy and it's alive. One of the other lessons I learned as I started to reclaim my culture was the two-row wampum.
My name is Susie Miller. I am a teacher at Emily C. General Elementary School at Six Nations. Our ancestors knew how to live in relationship because they lived in relationship for thousands of years. So the two-row is the first treaty that was made outside of Indigenous nations from Turtle Island. One purple row represents the ship of those that came across the water. The other row represents the canoe of our ancestors traveling the waters. What those two rows do is they travel parallel down the river of life, side by side, without interfering. In this row in the ship, thinking and way of life tends to be linear. It's always progressing. In the canoe way of understanding, it's like a circle, it's a cycle, and everything is connected. This treaty, when it was made, it's a promise, and there was no end point because they said that as long as the grasses grow and the rivers flow, this treaty will be in existence, and it still exists today. How we are to be living in relationship with each other.
Residential schools may have taken our languages. They may have taken our culture and our access to knowledge and ancestral wisdom. They may have caused trauma and pain that is still being felt today. But through all that, they could not take away my papa's connection to the water. It was inside of him all along, just like it's inside of you. Thank you for spending this time with me and my papa and the water and my family. Water is life. Yongana longwa onega. Onegawahi. Gunalongkwa.
This is for my bloodline, all my natives on the front line. Keep your money in your pipeline, cause nobody in their right mind. This is for my sisters, they were stolen and they're missing. And this is for my grandmother, and this is for your grandmother. Hit him with the water song, up G, yo. Shot accommodate like an alarm. So wake up out of Jucho and take up arms. Cause more is necessary than vocabulary. Whoa, it's a toxic rock import. Hitting your front door, CIA, I see you later. Your time is coming soon. I flip that shit like Pacino on a dark day afternoon. Yo, Attica, drug agents making static. Cause Logan Stance is back with Layla Black like, the water, so hit him with the water song, Ukchi, yo. Let me hit my water bomb, Ukchi, yo. Hit me with the water song, Ukchi, yo.